Hello and welcome to another Divorce Discussions episode. And I'm here to talk with a fellow podcaster and a person who just has some amazing insight into what people experience when they're going through real challenges in life. So I'd like to introduce you to Karen Hall, and I would like Karen to highlight what she wants you to know about her. So take it away, Karen.
Thank you, Marty. Yes. So I have dealt with a lot of adversity in my own life. I haven't specifically dealt with divorce, but I understand the feelings. In fact, a lot of people have said to me, have you been divorced? You act like you understand how it feels. And so I think it's very interesting that when we go through adversities and challenges in our life, you and I may not have the exact same situation, but we can relate on a feeling level.
Well, yeah, there's it doesn't even have to be divorce. We've all been dumped. We've all probably dumped somebody. So we've had these relationships if we've been on planet Earth for a while. So
exactly. And so I started out with in health and wellness, and then I moved into relationship coaching. I trained under Mary Ann Williamson, who is one of my favorite mentors.
And she's amazing. Yeah.
Is amazing. And that was a really special opportunity for me to get to become a spiritual life coach under her tutelage. And right now I am the managing director of the Los Angeles Tribune Women's Journal and also the Spanish Journal. And so I continue my coaching. And then I have a podcast called The Hero Within, where we feature inspiring true stories of people that are navigating adversity and how they find hope and healing to return to love.
Don't you find that especially, I think, Karen, in this day and age, we hear so many stories of people that are overworked and overstressed and have checked out of life and checked out of their career and, everything, that people are really craving hearing inspirational stories.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that is so true. And in fact, that's the thing that attracted me to the Los Angeles Tribune was that their mission is to uplift the world. And they are trying to change, the negative slant toward media to have messages that are positive and that inspire people. And so I describe it as we are spiritually hungry. We are just craving that kind of positivity in our world.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe I'm being overly glum about this, but so many things that start out good end up not so good or really, really bad. And I think because I work with people going through divorce, so I see relationships that are damaged. I see people that think that they're damaged. I see people that think their kids are damaged. And then I see the most damaging thing of all, as far as I'm concerned, is the social media bullshit, pardon my language, but that's out there where, you can't even be authentic on social media because people attack you. You can't have an opinion because people attack you. How do you see the people that you're able to work with? Because they are thriving. The people that come on your podcast are people that have overcome this adversity. Do you see any common threads in how they've done that?
Yes. And that has been the thing that is so fascinating. The people that have, overcome and come through to the other side all have gained hope. And the lessons that they learned are very similar. They have all grown in their emotional intelligence skills. They have learned how to use empathy for themselves and for others. They've learned powerful lessons in forgiveness. Almost every single person has a story about forgiveness in some way in their journey. And then practicing principles of self-love. That has been another huge factor that has helped people to move through the trauma. Many times there's severe trauma that people have gone through, and with any kind of a loss, going through the grieving process. And I find it very fascinating because so many times people think, well, why would I be grieving that? But any kind of a loss, and especially when, we're dumped or even if we're the one that's dumping someone else, there's still a loss of that relationship that we had.
Right.
And so loss is very real, and processing loss is, I feel, it takes a skill and it takes awareness to understand what grief is and how to move through grief in a healthy way.
Yeah, and that is so true because we're just going to sit here and tell each other how wonderful we are. So, yeah, something. No, but that really is true. I was reading an interesting statistic that 70% of all divorces in the United States now are filed by women. And the number of women that report feeling extreme grief or loss, or the number of people that report extreme grief or loss, it is about 60%, and there are almost 100% of those are the women that go through that. That doesn't mean that men don't, but this happens to be a woman's study, so that's who was in there. But one of the things that I think that I hear a lot that bothers me is that being sorry or empathizing with another person is a sign of weakness, and I am so sick of hearing that. Can you talk a little bit about the value of being able to be empathetic?
Oh, my goodness. Empathy is at the root. It's the foundation of the relationships, because without empathy, we can't have trust. And so we need to know that the other person understands. We need to understand them. And empathy really comes from a form of love, because so many times people think, well, I just need to walk a mile in your shoes, or to imagine walking a mile in your shoes. And that's empathy. That's not the only thing empathy is. Empathy is really removing judgment so that I can be with you in whatever your experience is, so that I can believe it from your perspective. Because a lot of times when somebody hears someone else's story, they're like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I wouldn't do that, and they're wrong for doing that or feeling that way. But when we have that blocks our ability to have empathy, because we aren't them. We don't, even if we went through the exact same thing, which usually never happens, we still aren't the same people. And even if we go through the same thing years earlier, we're usually not the same people that we were when we went through things. And so it's just, we don't have our past. We don't have their past. We don't have all the different factors that go into the experience. Right. And so when we can have empathy for someone else, what is very interesting about this is that love that we give out to them actually comes back to us. I don't know if you heard about karma. I'm sure you have, but right. There's so many different ways that happens. But when we give out love, it comes back to us. And it doesn't mean that we condone the person. It doesn't mean that we enable the person. It doesn't mean, a myriad of things. Love just means that we care about the person and we want good things for that person.
Right. And, that the whole idea of holding on to hatred or frustration or dislike, you're only harming yourself. And that's a big ask for people that are right in divorce. And it's not going to happen, but give yourself 6 months, a year. By then, those high emotions should have normalized. And, especially if you've got kids, there's a reason to be civil, because your children are watching how that relationship is unfolding. So I also like that you work on emotional intelligence. So can you talk a little bit around how you see emotional intelligence tying into having that resiliency to bounce back through some of these tough things that your guests have been through?
Yes. And you made a good point about those strong emotions. When we feel that anger, we don't immediately feel love. Maybe we set that as our goal. We want to feel that way. But it's okay if we're not there yet. We may need to work through the regret or the anger or the sorrow or the depression or the denial. I mean, there's so many different stages of that grief. And so emotional intelligence is so important because it first helps us to be self-aware. And so when we notice something, and it's usually within our body, maybe our shoulders are tense, or maybe, our heart starts pounding, or maybe we start to feel sick to our stomach or something. Usually we have a physical sign, but many times we don't even recognize it because we're not in tune with our body. But if we can start to be aware of the things within ourselves, maybe we just feel off. A lot of times my clients will say, I just feel off. I don't really know what's wrong. They can't pinpoint it. They can't pinpoint the thought. Like they say, well, just figure out what your thought is. And then it'll tell you what your feeling is. Well, sometimes people can't think of what the thought is. They're like, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm feeling. Sometimes right. We're so out of touch, or the pain is so great that we can't articulate it and we can't identify it. So right. Being aware and starting off with self-love towards ourselves. And it's okay. So talk to myself the way I would talk to a child that was suffering, a child that was so dear to me, that was so precious. I would say, come here. I love you. I'm so sorry you're hurting. Tell me more. Tell me more. And I'm here for you. And it's okay however you feel. And we're gonna work through this together. And whatever the things are that I would say that I wish somebody would say to me. And what's so interesting about that process is I started writing those things down, because a lot of times I was like, gosh, I wish somebody would say something that was helpful. And then I thought, they don't know what to say. But I know what I would love to hear. And so I write down what I would love to hear sometimes in a letter to myself, to help myself regulate my emotions and to feel that self-love. So that first step of the self-awareness. And then the second step is awareness of others. And so being able to detect, are you feeling off? How are you doing? What's going on over there with you? And really caring about you. And then showing that interest, letting you know, conveying that love without that judgment, which sometimes is tricky to do. And just knowing that someone cares is another way of helping us regulate our nervous system. That can just immediately start to calm us, just knowing that someone cares. And so being able to regulate my own emotions and then showing that love can help the other person with regulating their emotions. So those are two of the pillars.
That is so clear, and it's so easy to understand and so easy to visualize. And I think sometimes we hear comments from others that mean well. And, like I've had so many people who there's family, they finally decide to file for divorce, and then they're sad and they're grieving the loss of the future, the loss of the dream of the marriage. And yes, they filed for the divorce, and yes, they wanted it, but that, like you said, it doesn't mean they're not grieving it. And then somebody comes up to them and goes, "Oh, you're so much better without him." There is such a dumb ass comment to somebody going through a divorce. I mean, and I'm sure I've made it. I'm sure I have made that comment in the past before I became more aware that that's not helpful. And I loved what you said, just going up to somebody and saying, I really care for you. I'm here for you. What can I do to help? You don't need to make the comment. It's like when people pass away and somebody says, "Oh, they're in a much better place." Well, maybe, but that's not helping me right now. I'm dealing with this. So having that capacity to not try to make those comments and just support the person. I love that idea to write down those things so that you're more aware.
And what's interesting about that process of when people make those kinds of comments, when I'm the one that's making that kind of a comment, it helps me to realize that comes from me feeling uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable that you're in pain. I want you to feel better. And I think maybe if I say this, well, let's look on the bright side. You're better off without him, or whatever it is that I'm saying. I'm trying to shift it away from your pain. Now, when I'm on the receiving end and someone says something like that, it's invalidating to my pain. And it causes me to feel dismissed in my pain. And so I feel almost stifled, and I want to express how much I miss this person. And they're saying, "You're better off without him." Well, how do I respond to that then? Well, wait, pause for just a second. I want to tell you more about why I miss him. I know I left him, but I want to tell you why I miss him. Yes. People they just can't comprehend that. And so when I'm on the receiving end, it also helps me to realize they're saying that because they feel uncomfortable with my pain.
And I think one of the things is that's where that empathy works for both of the people in that conversation. Because I really do believe at some point in time, if it's a good friend, if it's somebody maybe you only see every now and then, maybe you just let it go. But if it's a really good friend, I would hope that you would have the ability, not right then, but maybe, another time when everybody's calm, you're sitting around having a coffee or whatever you're doing, to be able to say, when we get this kind of made me feel uncomfortable, or this did make me feel uncomfortable. And I just want you to understand that I know where you were coming from, but I also want you to understand what that caused for me, because that was, those kind of conversations are sometimes the best learning experiences, but it takes a lot of courage to start it. But if you've got a friend that you know, or a family member that you know that really wants to be on your side, be on your team, help you out, then I think they will listen and change.
Yeah, and that requires a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to convey your thoughts and your feelings in a way where you own it and you're helping them to understand where you're coming from. And also to recognize that sometimes it's hard for people to hear those things. Maybe they feel chastised, or maybe they feel scolded or shame, that they had made that comment. They didn't realize, maybe they had
Right.
no idea, how it impacted us. And so that emotional intelligence is very important. And using empathy in those situations is vital, because that can be kind of tricky. And
Yeah.
even having the courage to bring up the topic can be tricky, because we're like, I don't know, what if they think I'm shaming them, or what if they think I'm mad at them, or whatever. So it requires emotional intelligence to have those kind of conversations, but they are so beneficial when you can approach it from that mindset.
Well, and there's so much talk, and Karen, I know that I'm sure that it comes up a lot on your podcast too, but about boundary setting and about, setting healthy ways to have these communications. And that's all great to read it in a book and say, well, you have to tell the people what you want and what you expect, but it's really hard to actually do it. Like it takes, like you said, it takes a lot of courage, and I think it takes a lot of planning the conversation before you actually have it, and anticipating how they're going to respond, and having some ways to deal with different responses so that it doesn't escalate and just become more of a conflict rather than less of one.
So true. And that's one of the things that my clients really appreciate, is being able to role play because, I've heard so many of the same conversations, and I just, anticipate, well, what if they said this? Then what would you say? And what if this happened? What would your response be? And for me, that's very powerful when I'm the one that's getting coached. I appreciate so much being able to go through this, and because I kind of get caught off guard sometimes if I don't do that. And then I'm the deer in the headlights. Whoa, what just happened? And I am left speechless sometimes. And that doesn't help the conversation or reconciliation or anything. And so it does help me to go through and to anticipate and to role play and to just think, about how do I want to convey this? The other thing that helps me a lot when I'm going into those situations is to remember this mantra. And this is one of my favorite mantras. And it is, what would love do? And so when I get to those difficult situations, I try to say it before I go into the situation. And then in the middle of it, when I start to feel uncomfortable, or maybe I'm even, shell shocked for a moment, I try to remember, what would love do? And what is interesting about that is that when I'm in shock like that, when someone says something that stuns me, I can't remember anything. And so I have to emotionally regulate my nervous system so that I can even remember that. But I read that mantra every day, and I say that in the mirror, and I get to that mantra quicker when I'm doing that practice. So I have several practices that I do on a daily basis that help me with my emotional intelligence and remind me of the things that work, for me in situations. And I encourage other people to do a daily practice as well.
And so that's one thing that I want to throw in here. I'm a big emotional intelligence person. I'm EQI2 certified. I've been doing this for interestingly enough, a lot of law firms and places like that. But one of the things that I think is really important, and the thing that I love about emotional intelligence, is it's not like a predestined thing. Like there's no, like IQ is sort of, you reach your maximum IQ and then that's it. No matter what you study, no matter what you do, you might be able to change it a little bit, but it's not going to dramatically change. Emotional intelligence, like you say, you have to practice. It's a practice. It's like yoga. You're not, the yoga star of the universe. Everybody keeps practicing. Everybody gets a little better each time. And by doing it when you're calm and making it part of your daily routine, it becomes you develop those neural pathways. And then when you're in a crisis, they kick in and they're there for you so I love that. And I love that. What would love do? I think that's a fantastic just mantra, affirmation, whatever you want to call it. I love that, Karen.
I appreciate your love for neuroscience, because I love that too. In fact, I didn't understand for many years about strengthening that neural pathway and why that daily practice was so important, and how it would help me to get back to that truth quicker.
Right.
When I was dysregulated. I really didn't understand that for many years. And And so when I started practicing that, before we had cell phones, I would write these little things on index cards and I would carry them around in my purse. And my family's like, what is on those cards? I was trying to make that, that rut deeper in my brain so that neural pathway was easier to be accessed. So I'm so glad that you appreciate that.
Oh, I do. I totally do. And I wish we could keep talking about this. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So Karen, I just want to thank you. This has been such a fun conversation. I really appreciate your insight, and we're definitely going to have to follow up and do a longer podcast in the next little while here. So Karen, thank you so much for all you've shared with us today.
Thank you, Marty. And I just want to applaud you for the work you're doing on the G shift, because we all need the information that you are sharing, because you uplift us, you strengthen us in these difficult times in our life.
Thank you so much, Karen. Take care.
Thanks.